What's up, holiday nerds? It's your boy, the OG GM, broadcasting live from Site B here at sunny small island off the coast of Costa Rica, or Ventura, California, depending upon where you think I live. It's Thursday. Oh, look at the big doggo. It's Thursday. We're going to the magic store that gives us food in exchange for money. It's spiraling towards the end of the year, which means I'm running out of topics to talk about that aren't related to Wizards of the Coast. But going forward, I want the channel to focus more on non-Wizards of the Coast things. I think it's the only way I can grow and get the sponsorships and the monetizations that I really want, is to stop focusing so much on just the negativity that Wizards of the Coast is continuing to speculate. But I don't want to give up completely talking about fantasy role-playing, so focusing more on the OSR and the OSE and the OGL, because, you know, I'm writing product for the OSR, all of which are exclusively on Big Geek Emporium till the end of the year. So that's, you know, sort of the areas I want to focus more on. So, that said, it's time for an OSR DM tip. Dun, dun, dun. Secret Ninja Game Master Tips. Explosions. All right, so here's an argument. It doesn't really get talked about as much. In fact, I'm not sure I'm aware of it being spoken of at all on any of the other OSR channels. Maybe they have been, and I've just not paid attention. So, you know what, today, considering it's dogs and it's Christmas, let's talk about familiars and pets and animal companions, and what's the difference between a familiar and a well-trained pet and an animal companion. Okay, familiars have been around forever. They pre-exist the game. They usually were associated with witches in the old days. Oh, she's got a black cat, she's a witch, the black cats are familiar, that kind of stuff. Black cats, of course, you know, used to be considered bad luck, and they were considered that they carried the plague during the medieval ages in Europe. So people foolishly killed off black cats and cats in general because they thought they carried the plague, but it turned out that was what helped the plague spread, because the cats were in fact killing the creatures that were spreading the plague. So by eliminating so many cats, they prolonged the Black Plague. But yes, cats, crows, even frogs, owls, rats have all been associated with witches, which became associated with magic, which became associated with our lovely hobby. Let's see if there's anything we want to read in the box. No. Okay. So as it stands, your spellcaster wants to get himself or herself a familiar. Why? Why would you do that? What is the advantages of having a familiar give you, depending upon the iteration of the game? Well, bare minimum, it gives you a extra set of eyes and an ability to deliver information from one place to another without actually being there. It's pretty much universally believed in every game iteration that the familiar and its wizard master, howdy, and its wizard master share some form of psychic connection. So the wizard could send its familiar out to perform small tasks, deliver messages, be an extra pair of eyes, stuff like that, you know. In combat terms, it means you could, like, you know, have the familiar go down the hallway and look up stuff, tell you what's ahead, flank bad guys, things like that. So bare minimum, it's the extra pair of eyes. And moving forward, the familiar can sometimes, in some iterations, allow you to cast spells through it. So basically being an extension of yourself. Now, of course, there's some wishy-washiness in there because, well, it doesn't have fingers. How can it cast a spell? But it's not. It's basically a device that allows the wizard to cast spells through. So the wizard casts a spell wherever he is via his connection with the familiar. The spell is cast through the familiar in some form, and then it is deployed in some variation thereof. So that's another reason why a wizard might want to have a familiar, is in addition to have, well, you know, a companion to hang out with, the extra pair of eyes, the ability to deliver messages, the combat advantage of having something that you could use to flank your bad guys or go get things that you can't reach. It's the ability to cast spells through it. And finally, depending upon the whatever other iteration wizards of, there's also the spiritual connection between the two. So, that cloud. Awesome. So, you know, some variations, the wizard and the familiar share a spell, sort of like a Horcrux in Harry Potter. So as long as the familiar's alive, the wizard's alive. If the familiar dies, the wizard takes damage. The wizard can store part of its soul in the familiar, so if the wizard dies, there's a chance it can be come back via familiar magic. So that's another one. So bottom line, from a pure tactical point of view, it gives you an extra pair of eyes, and it gives you a way to deliver messages. It might give you a way to deliver spells, but it allows you to have certain combat advantages. So that's the benefit of familiar. Plus the familiar is basically never gonna, you know, go, you know, I don't want to do that. Now then, moving over to animal companions. What's the difference between an animal companion and a trained, you know, and that dog? Well, an animal companion is usually treated like an NPC and has a lot more connection to the individual who either charmed it or summoned it or made friends with it. Like, druids and rangers have had a history of being able to have an animal companion hang out with them and do things for them. So while they may or may not be able to communicate with said animal companion, it can't do, you know, the things that a familiar can do. You can't cast spells through it. You can't communicate through it. You can't see through its eyes, but it's usually extremely loyal and willing to do almost whatever you ask, as long as it doesn't jeopardize itself. So like if you said to your familiar, jump off that cliff, the familiar might do it. But if you said to an animal companion, jump off that cliff, the animal companion would be like, what you talking about, Willis? So that's the difference. But an animal companion is much more loyal than just, say, a trained pet, and the communication is much easier. So when you ask your animal companion to do things, there is this almost psychic bond between the two of you, and the animal companion is more willing to do things like fight with you and stuff like that. And they usually have a higher intellect. Now, finally, pets. You know, my character wants a mule. My character wants a riding dog. My character wants a pet mucky. Well, pets are limited to what they have been trained to do and what commands you can give them, and their loyalty is much lower than, say, that of an animal companion. Like, you could treat an animal companion almost like an NPC in the way of its loyalty to the character that made the animal companion. But a well-trained pet, even, you know, a trained warhorse or a trained guard dog, is still never going to be as loyal as a familiar or even an animal companion. It's, at its bare essence, is still going to be just a well-trained animal. So while you could communicate completely with a familiar and it can understand everything you say and even can understand things other people say, as opposed to an animal companion where the player character and the animal companion can share some level of communication, the rest of the party is like, I don't know what he's talking about. With a well-trained pet, the well-trained pet is mostly going to be loyal to the person it's been trained to be loyal to. It's going to respond more to basic needs and be more willing to go against his training, you know, with a animal companion wolf as opposed to just a trained wolf. It's more likely that the trained wolf will, you know, fail morale checks, or be more interested in keeping itself alive and doing what's in its base nature, as opposed to, say, the animal companion wolf, who might be a little bit more intelligent, might be a little bit more loyal, and definitely has that stronger connection with the individual that has made the animal companion connection. So that, I think, is the breakdown. But then we have to add to the mix, well, what about creations? What about homunculuses? What about, you know, summon monsters? What about if I build a clockwork skeleton or a clockwork dog? What's the connection with there? Well, then we're entering into a whole new realm of magic-y stuff, and that's not the point of this GM tip. Today we're just talking about familiar versus animal companion versus well-trained pet. Now, familiar is going to be really expensive, like bare minimum, it's 100 gold pieces. Animal companion will be pretty much the same as taking care of a NPC, you know. And then a pet, well, you know, a pet is going to be, I have to buy a bag of kitty litter or whatever. So that's part of the thing. And in exchange for the money you spend is the level of loyalty, the level of versatility. Oh, hello, doggo. And the level of things it's willing to do for you, and the level of connection. Obviously, a familiar or a homunculus is best, but not everybody can have a familiar or a homunculus. A lot of people can have animal companions, but anybody can buy a pet. And then there will be some arguments about, well, you have to train the pet to blah, 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 and whatever, and stuff like that. It's going to cost a lot of money, and blah, blah, blah. As opposed to just going, I'm a druid and I'm summoning my animal companion. As opposed to a wizard going, okay, I got 100 gold pieces. I got all the materials. I got the spare time. I got the safe place. I'm summoning my familiar. Now, the downside to the familiar is it's usually random. Don't think it's all guns and roses. Oh, no, no, no. When you summon a familiar, you don't know what you're getting. It could be something awesome, or it could be a frog. So that's the downside, as opposed to pet and animal companion, where you kind of can choose what animal companion you're summoning. You know, you're gonna go summon animal companion bear, as opposed to summon animal companion first random thing that shows up, and you've got combat squirrel. As opposed to pet, where you're just gonna walk in and go, I need a horse. So while familiar may give you the best choices, it is the most expensive, and you have that randomness where you might not get the familiar you want, and instead you're stuck with a snail. Animal companion is best in that you get exactly what you want, but you have to treat it like an NPC, which means it has its own goals and desires and needs some type of reward to keep working for you. Pet, it's the cheapest. You get exactly what you want, but a pet is only as good as it's trained, and a pet is only good as its communication level with you and how loyalty it may or may not be to you. So that's it. That's today's super secret ninja DM tips on a topic that I don't think gets discussed enough, and that's pet versus animal companion versus familiar. Do you want to see me talk more about this topic? Maybe address things like creations, like homunculuses and stuff like that? Let me know. If you never want to hear about me talk about this ever again, let me know. If you have any DM tips you would like me to address, or any other topics you want me to go into in 2023, let me know. If you haven't had a chance yet, please subscribe. Help me hit my next goal and help me get monetized and sponsored. Don't forget, with the holidays coming up, I've got a ton of merch available. Links down below. And above all, stay warm, stay healthy, stay happy. Happy holidays, stay safe, and get off my land.